Erev Tov, everyone. Good evening. If you can take a seat, and if you want any coffee, tea, donut, please grab it now. Not that I think anybody will mind if you get up and get it in the middle, and I appreciate everyone's patience. There were a few miscommunications, but also some technical difficulties that had to be ironed out. And don't get anxious, but we'll now be on NBC. No, not really. I want to express my sincere gratitude to Ori Cohen. One, on a personal level, I'm just happy to see him. But, we know him as being this wonderful Shliach Tzibor who has been conducting our services in the high holidays over the past number of years. But he actually has a life beyond that. And it's one of tremendous responsibility, being the director of the Slivka Center at Yale University. And I asked him to come, and we actually talked about this last year. It's just become even more pressing and more serious this year to talk about what it's like for Jews on campus. And I have to be clear, I do think that many of our students on campus are really on ground zero when it comes to dealing with anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish hate in this country. It's not to say that all campuses are terrible, they're not. And from speaking to Uri, from speaking to friends who are professors at different universities, sometimes what we hear in the news has been sensationalized. What a shock. And that it may not adequately capture what's going on. Nonetheless, this is a very, very serious issue, and one that we should know about for our children, our grandchildren, for our friends. And it's one of the many fronts. As I said, it's probably the ground zero, but it's really one of the many fronts that we are facing an increasing amount of anti-Semitism. And it's deeply, deeply disturbing when you, even if the news is sensationalizing things, what has been going on has been really terrible in some places. But better to hear from an expert who lives it and knows much more of the details. So I'm very happy that Ori is able to join us.
Thank you, Rabbi Popke. No, sorry, Ron. Too soon, sorry. Force of habit. It's wonderful to be here. Yeah, is that better? Taller than you, okay. It's really a pleasure to be here. I always feel at home here because my in-laws, Judy and Joel, and this is one of my home communities. So I feel really grateful to Rabbi Popke for the invitation and chance to be here with you tonight. Right. Yes, very sneaky, but it worked. Definitely worked. Actually, if I recall, we had a date to do this in 2020, in March of 2020, and it was the last Shabbat before everything shut down. We had planned to do this. So I'm glad we're all here, and glad to be able to be here to do this finally. So what I want to do is share some thoughts with you over the next 15, 20 minutes, something like that, and then open the floor for questions. The questions are always the best part of these types of presentations, and so I really want to get to the things that you're really interested in, but I'm sure there are things that will be of interest to everyone, so I'll start with those. So let's begin as follows. What is it that the most Jews do? Like, think of things that Jews have in common. What is the thing that Jews do the most? Eat chicken soup, that's good. Have close families? Nice, nice. How about things that are more particularly Jewish? Have a Passover Seder. Okay, good. Hanukkah candles. High holiday services. That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one. What else? Yeah, somebody always says that. That's great. That's great. So it turns out that the number one thing that Jews do is go to college. A higher percentage of Jews go to college than any of the things that people mentioned, except kvetching. But going to college is a really, really key part of Jewish identity, so it seems. And I think that's one of the reasons why this moment feels so fraught. Because so many of our kids and grandkids and people we know and love are on college campuses right now, and they seem really dangerous. Like Rabbi Popke said, the media says what they want to say, and they paint the picture they want to paint. And they only paint the bad pictures. They never paint the good pictures. So be careful whenever you read anything having to do with campuses, and probably other things too. Be careful to look for for the good things. There are a lot of good things and also challenging things. I have another question for you. Raise your hand if you think that the world is headed in the right direction. No one? No one? Actually, I asked this question once at a synagogue, and a 5-year-old raised her hand. I think that's pretty good. That she thought life was perfect. So, raise your hand if you think that we should maintain the status quo into the future. No hands, no takers. So, I think this is a really powerful thing. I always heard that Albert Einstein said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. Turns out he didn't say that. It's a misattribution. But I think it is nevertheless true. If we want the world to be different, if we want the future to be better than the present, we've got to think differently. We've got to do differently. And that is the lens through which I want to suggest that we think about the college campuses. Because college, the way I always thought about it, is a place where we get to encounter lots of ideas. We get exposed to texts and people and all kinds of things that expand our horizons, that help us to be more well-rounded people. That hasn't changed. College campuses are still like that. And in fact, I want to point out the following. College campuses are more like that now than they have ever been. And the students on college campuses have opportunities that we don't have in lots of ways, but especially the following way. I heard from Dr. Yehuda Kurtzer, the president of the, co-president, I guess, of the Shalom Hartman Institute. And he pointed out that most people choose where they live specifically with the purpose of reducing or minimizing the number of times they will have to engage with someone with whom they disagree. I'll say it again. Most people choose where they're going to live so that they will have to interact with people with whom they disagree as little as possible. Kind of rings true. Red states, blue states, different neighborhoods. People are choosing where to spend their time so as to be around people just like them. Now, just a refresher here. Who thinks that we're doing well enough that we should keep doing the same thing over and over again? Is the world getting better because we're coalescing just with people we agree with? Are things getting better? Is it working? I don't think it's working. So I think of college campuses then, where those students don't have the choices that we have to live in White Meadow Lake, to live in New Jersey, to live in places where we don't have to encounter other people. Not that we agree with everybody we meet, but by and large. College students are assigned to dormitories. They're assigned to roommates. Even if you get to pick your roommates in your room, there are people right next door who you don't get to pick. And chances are you're going to encounter people in your room, in your dormitory, in your class, anywhere you go, you're going to encounter people with whom you disagree. So students are doing something really different from what the rest of us are doing. And for my money, I want to give what they're doing a chance, because what we're doing stinks. Now, that doesn't mean that it's all hunky-dory. It most certainly is not. This has been an incredibly difficult time on college campuses, as it has been elsewhere, and the dynamics are really interesting. I was talking with the imam on campus I don't know, probably in November or so, and I raised the following proposition with which he agreed. Jewish students on campus are not afraid of the Muslims. They're not afraid of the Palestinians. And the Palestinian students are not afraid of the Jews. We're both afraid of the mob, of the people who are looking for causes to join, for justices to fix, for ways to label the oppressors and the oppressed. There's this binary that has developed, which is not a positive, that everyone or everything or every corporation or every brand, everything is either one or the other. And that's what makes things hard, because when you engage with people with whom you disagree, there are chances that people won't understand each other so well, that people will jump on bandwagons on issues they don't really understand. And that's happening. It's also interesting in my many conversations with administrators at Yale, the level of knowledge of who Jews are is pitifully low. Pitifully low. They don't understand any sense of Jewish history. They don't understand that Judaism is not just a religion. They think of, at Queens College, where I was before I was at Yale, the Jewish community was on the religion floor. In the multicultural center, or the interfaith center. They think about Judaism as a religion, but we all know that if we talk about Judaism as a religion, we are only talking about this many Jews, this much of the percentage of Jews. Now, we all know that Judaism is a religion, and it's a beautiful religion, and a wonderful and meaningful religion. And it's a lot more, too. And many more people connect with other aspects of being Jewish than religion. So it's a fundamental misunderstanding of who Jews are. They have no idea how to navigate anti-Semitism and anti-Israel stuff. They can't figure it out, and they're scared of it. I think one of the most sobering moments in this whole time period for me was the recognition that universities are corporations. I thought, really until October 7th, that colleges and universities are institutions that really embrace the greatest of what it can be, what it means to be a human being, the greatest of human achievement, and places in which the axis of decision-making is made up by data points of morals, ethics, and values. It's a beautiful dream. I'm grieving it, because it turns out that universities are corporations that have to worry about the same things as every corporation has to worry about. In the university's context, press is usually bad. Being demonstrated against by students hurts. Being accused of prioritizing one group over another when they claim to be a community institution is a problem. What do you do with faculty? You got to have tenured faculty, but then what if they do things and say things you don't like, or that don't match up with the values of the institution? It's a problem. I don't envy the situation that leaders of universities are in. It's very difficult. And at the same time, I feel grateful to have been educated about the nature of the university, because now I know how to engage with it. I know how to engage with an institution that has concerns that I can relate to and that I can also help them navigate. That's really why, one of the reasons why, you may have noticed that Yale has not been in the news very much. There are lots of other schools that have got a lot more press, all of it bad, and you haven't heard much about Yale. I think there are 3 reasons for that. One reason is luck. We have had no physical violence at Yale. For what reason, I cannot figure out, but I'm tremendously grateful. A second reason is that our president, Peter Salovey, has been strong in his words and his plans and his actions. He came out with a statement, I think on a Tuesday after October 7th, that was pretty good. There was a period in the middle where there was some uncertainty as to where things were going to go. And then on December 7th, I encourage you all to take a look. If you want to look at it, his piece was called Against Hatred. Peter Salovey, the president of Yale, December 7th of this past year, laid out a very clear and comprehensive plan to promote the welfare of Jewish life and Jewish students on campus and fight anti-Semitism, and also look out for Islamophobia and Arab and Palestinian students separately and not interdependently. So what we each now can do is demand and hold the university accountable to do what it said it's going to do without having to worry about the other side, because he's made commitments to both. Our job is to hold the feet to the fire on the Jewish side. Now, I'm really happy to say that the statement that he put out on December 7th accorded very, very closely with recommendations that we drafted. So the 3 parts, I'll say more about that in a second, the 3 parts that contribute to the fact that Yale's been better. One is luck. The second is a president who gets it and is willing to be courageous. And also the partnership with Hillel. We helped Yale make many fewer mistakes than its peers. Many fewer mistakes. And that's because they trust us. Because they know that I know what they're dealing with. I am engaging with them on their own terms, not expecting them to work miracles, but helping them to navigate situations that I understand, because now I understand they're a corporation, and I understand what their pushes and pulls are. There was a situation you might have heard of early on. There was a professor who was teaching, in the middle of teaching, didn't do this while teaching, but was actively teaching a course that last semester. She posted a number of very anti-Jewish, pro-Hamas, celebratory statements in the aftermath of October 7th, and there was a huge outcry for her ouster. I didn't join that. Not because I liked what she said or I thought she was justified or anything. But I knew immediately Yale is never going to fire her, because Yale cares about freedom of speech. They determined, as I knew that they would, that freedom of speech is inviolate. She's a tenured faculty, but even if she weren't tenured faculty, it's the freedom of speech. There was no way they were going to fire her, so I didn't even try. I avoided that situation, that effort, completely, and focused my efforts elsewhere in places where I thought we could make a difference. For instance, free speech is not harmless speech. Just because someone has the right to say something doesn't mean it doesn't hurt someone else. And so I said to the president, if you're going to protect the speech, you also have to protect the people who are sustaining the harm from that speech. Especially when you're an institution like Yale, which has a whole Belonging at Yale initiative. It's this whole big thing. There's a big scorecard that's coming out just in a couple of days about this whole Belonging at Yale initiative. You can't call yourself a place of belonging when you don't pay attention to the impacts of free speech. Another example, I think, and I said this to the president also, I think there's a lane where you can say, what this professor said is protected by free speech. She's not going to get fired. She gets to continue doing her job. And yet, I want to also say that what she said does not resonate with the values of this institution, does not contribute to the type of environment that we are trying to create here. I think there's a lane. I'm not the president of the university, so I don't get to decide whether that's an actual lane or not. But that's a place I can make a difference. And so I focus my efforts on helping Yale make fewer mistakes, not wasting my energy in places where I cannot make a difference, which in turn builds trust and respect with the university because they know that I understand them. And they have also proven to me that they care about us. There's a program that we started in the summer of 22, so like 16 months ago, a little more than that, I guess, called the Campus Climate Initiative, which is a program of Hillel International designed to train university administrators on anti-Semitism, who Jews are, how to navigate Israel and anti-Semitism issues, and also what federal laws apply to universities that take federal money, which is most of them. It was a great program, and we applied for this program with the permission of the president. And as a result, 7 Yale administrators spent 15 months in a training with me. I mean, I wasn't giving the training. We were all working together taking this training. We had a group whose whole purpose was to put together a set of recommendations for how the university can take anti-Semitism seriously. Now, the timing for us worked out perfectly because the end of our program was this past December. So the timing could not have been better. But it was because of this program that we started in the summer of 22. There was no crisis in Israel in 2022. I mean, no acute crisis. It wasn't May of 21 when there was a crisis. It was 22. No one was paying attention to 22. We started this program, and it was because of this that not only did I get connected with the 2 most wonderful people in the university, one who's an assistant vice president for university life who sits at the intersection of mental health, public safety, and student life. She's the one who handles all demonstrations, all protests, all potentially contentious issues, and the head of the DEI office, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion office. Because of this program, I got connected with those 2 people who are both enormous champions of the Jewish community at Yale. They have answered every call. There were days I talked to them both multiple times during the day. That wouldn't have happened if it had not been for this program that we had the foresight to sign up for, and the president agreed to. And this committee put together a set of recommendations which are almost exactly what the president announced. None of this is like big, big things to shout from the rooftops about. These are not emotionally gratifying events where everybody gets to vent their frustrations and concerns. This is relationship building. It's built in trust and respect. If we had a different president, would it have worked the same? Don't know. We will have a new president, by the way. Our president is stepping down in June. So it's going to be an interesting few months. See what happens. But our president and also these 2 administrators that I mentioned have been working really hard to institutionalize all of the different supports for the Jewish community that have developed over the last few months, so that it won't matter who the next president is. It's just the way Yale operates now. I think this is a success story. Certainly compared to other places that I won't mention, but you know who they are. It's not a silver bullet, but I can point to success. I want to do two other things and then I'll stop. It's really important to understand the difference between anti-Semitism and internal Jewish debate. It's really, really important for us to do that. Sometimes they get confused. People get confused when they hear college students who are, for example, arguing for a ceasefire. Some people think that's anti-Semitism. People get concerned when you have students who want to engage with issues that are critical of Israel. Some people think that's anti-Semitism. I don't think it is. When you have people who are trying to make Israel the best it can be, that's an internal Jewish debate. When you have people who are out for the destruction of Jews, that's anti-Semitism. It's really hard to separate them sometimes, especially now. But I do want to lay out a couple of different frameworks for us to think about this. There are, from my study, 3 biblical frameworks around Israel that don't get along very well with each other. First one is Genesis. Genesis is where God says to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob, but let's focus on Abraham, I'm giving you this land as an inheritance. It's a gift. You get it. It's going to be yours. Now, the only hitch there is you can't have it now, God says, because the iniquity of the people who are living there now isn't complete yet. But otherwise, you're going to get this land. This is an unconditional gift. Israel is an unconditional gift to the Jewish people. That's Genesis, which is all fine and good until you get to Leviticus. Vayikra says, God says, you can live in the land that I'm going to give you as an inheritance, but only if you live in accordance with my commandments. Now, what commandments are those? Leviticus is all about civil society, also about holiness, about how people treat each other. You treat the poor and the orphan and the widow, thank you. If you treat those people well and you take care of other people in your society, take care of those in need, you can stay in the land. Otherwise, it's going to spew you out, just like it did the people who lived there before you. That's not so unconditional. It's conditional. You can have the land if you deserve it. And how do we determine whether you deserve it? Whether you treat people well. Take care of those in need. It's that simple. Otherwise, it's going to vomit you right out. Well, that's not the same. And then you get to Deuteronomy, which has the one that gives me the willies the most. Deuteronomy says, Moshe is saying to the people on God's behalf, you will go to the land that I've given you as a gift, and you will slaughter everybody. You'll destroy everything. You will show them no mercy. You will destroy their temples. You will not show mercy to their children. You must destroy everything. I don't like that one so much because I don't want the utter destruction to be my people's MO. But that's just me. There are plenty of people in the global Jewish people who agree with that framework. So we have a problem, don't we? We have 3 biblically rooted frameworks which are totally irreconcilable. Is it a conditional gift or is it an unconditional gift? Which is it, Torah? Come on, make up your mind. Doesn't make up its mind. I work for an organization called Hillel, which is named after Hillel the Elder, the great Jewish sage. And what was Hillel known for? He was known for a lot of things, and it's notable because the law follows Hillel, 98% of the time. And one of the reasons given for why the law follows Hillel so often is because one of his characteristics was articulating his opponent's position before his own. Beit Shammai says this, Beit Hillel says that. We have Shammai's opinion, even though we follow it only 2% of the time. But we have it to learn from, because Hillel says, learning from my opponent doesn't make me weaker, it makes me stronger. And how do we know? Because he wins 98% of the time. That's a pretty good percentage. So Shammai says this, Hillel says this, and then the halacha kebeit Hillel. The halacha, the law, the decision follows Hillel. I think that's pretty good proof of the way we're supposed to be doing this. We articulate our opponent's position. We listen. We learn about other people's views. And that makes us stronger, not weaker. I shared 3 frameworks. I'll share a 4th, and then a story, and then I'll stop. The 4th framework is the one that responds to the fact that the other 3 can't be reconciled. Deuteronomy 32, I think it is. Famous section, Parashat, I think it's Vayelech. The commandments, the Torah, and by this I think I'll apply in this case to mean what to do when the rest of the Torah doesn't make sense together, how to navigate a complex situation. Lo bashamayim hi. It's not in the heavens, so that you have to find somebody to go up into the heavens and get it for you. It's not across the ocean, where you have to build a boat and send somebody across to get it, to help you figure it out. No. God says, the Torah is right in front of you. It's in your mouth. It's in your heart. And I would add, it's in your ears. Because we're not allowed to abdicate. The Torah doesn't help us. Conditional or unconditional. Do we love everybody or destroy everybody? The Torah tells us all of these. So what do? Do we throw up our hands and say, forget it? Do we say, no, you know what? Genesis is right. Forget you, Leviticus. Get out. Can't do that. Not allowed to just throw out the rest of the Torah you don't like. Grapple with it. How do we grapple with it? Engage with each other. The answers are right in front of us. Doesn't mean it's easy to figure out. But if we listen to each other, if we articulate our opponent's position before our own, if we approach people with an attitude of listening, that'll be different. Most of the time we spend our time talking, sometimes yelling. It's not working well. It's not making the future better. We've got to do something different. So I think college students have enormous opportunity. Yeah, they're under pressure. Yeah, it's messy. Yeah, they got to figure out, what does it mean to be a Jew in a world of mostly non-Jews? We're all doing the same thing. All of us. So I think we can learn. We can learn from what's going on. Yes, we need to protect the Jewish community. Yes, we need to be in conversation with the authorities around and with those who can make decisions and make things better or worse. But each of us, in our conversations, in our lives, when we're talking to people, let's do a lot more listening. I'll finish with this story, like I promised, and then I will stop talking and get into the questions. October 9th, the Monday right after the attack, I gathered in my office 20 or so students who were all involved in leadership in the Israel space. We have 7 or 8 different Israel-related groups, some on the right, some on the left, in lots of different perspectives. I asked them to go around and talk about what their communities needed in this moment. So each of them got to share, they had their few minutes. The last student to speak, the very last one was a student representing our most politically progressive Israel group. He started to share just like everyone else had shared. He got out about 1 sentence and got yelled at and shut down by 2 of the other people in the room. They didn't like what he had to say, so they shouted him down. And this student, in his tears of anger and sadness, said three things I'll never forget. First thing he said was, if you had just listened to me, you would have realized that I agree with you, but you didn't even give me that chance. The second thing he said was, you're my friend. Outside this room, you're my friend. Don't you owe me better than this? And the third thing he said was, why do you insist on doing to me what you hate when other people do to you? I was stunned that in a moment of anger and sadness, somebody could be so, articulate, real, human, smart. A beat later, one of the students who had shouted him down said, you're right. I do owe you better. I am your friend. I do owe you better than this. My emotions got the best of me. I did that thing I promised I would never do to someone else. I'm sorry. I want to make it up to you. I was stunned again. I don't know too many adults who could do either of those things. Be reasonable and articulate and human in a moment of pain, or be self-reflective enough and circumspect to say, I made a mistake. If the students can do it, there's hope. If they can do it, we can do it. And there's a lot we can learn from their example. Thank you all. Sure. So our best guess is it's about 11% Jewish. We have somewhere between 700 and 800 Jewish undergrads, and out of a total of 6,800 or something like that. So yeah, it's about 11%, which is at least anecdotally down from where it has historically been, but that's about where we are. Yeah. Yeah. So for the benefit of people on the live stream, the comment is, isn't it ironic that places of higher learning don't have education? The level of education is so low. And the second question is, have there been any changes as a result of the congressional testimony of the presidents? As I was talking to a colleague today who spent some time talking with an official at Yale who thinks this is just the beginning. This is not the end of a process, this is the beginning of a process. It was such a terrible day when those three university presidents spoke. It was such a failure, epic failure of leadership and morality. And I like to say, my comment is usually that they were over-lawyered. They got too much consulting from the lawyers. And yesterday I was sitting with a partner in a New York law firm who said the same thing without my prompting. So I feel a little bit better saying it, him agreeing with me. It was a failure of category, in my opinion. I don't think that you can be a leader of a community, a leader that people look up to and identify with, and get up there and give the most inhumane answer one could ever think of. Just a total lack. Two of those presidents are no longer presidents, so changes on the way in those schools. Who they will choose to take their place is anyone's guess. I think because Yale is also in a presidential search, not because of the testimony, but just because of the natural course, we're likely to, I mean, the stakes are going to be even higher. There's a lot of discussions in a lot of different ways. People are taking different views on diversity, equity, inclusion efforts, good, bad, lots of different views there. There are I've heard a lot of people talking about whether they should continue to support colleges and universities that they've historically supported financially. I think different alumni bases have taken different approaches, some of which have worked better than others. At Yale, the pretty universal approach has been to continue supporting the university to maintain the Jewish seat at the table. And I think that's worked out reasonably well, but I can't say that that's the only solution. The one thing I would say is that anybody who's thinking about their philanthropy in that way should be putting money into their Hillels. I don't know whether you're taking it from the university or whatever your calculation is. The Hillels need a lot of help because there are going to be Jewish students on campuses for a long time. Why? Because the number one thing that Jews do is go to college. And that's not going to change. And they're not all going to Yeshiva University. We all know that, right? So they're going to be going to college, which means that the Hillels are more important than they ever have been. And all of the universities, including the best of them, have proven they will not and cannot meet the needs of the Jewish community on their own. They will not see it as in their own interests just by nature. They need help. They need support. They need guidance. And so I'm sure everyone here has connections to multiple campuses, and everyone on the live stream does too. And I really want to encourage you to get in touch with your Hillels, support your Hillels. I think that I'm a little bit biased, but I think that the college campuses are the most important places for the Jewish community to be investing, because the decisions that students make in college are the ones that last their whole lives. The relationships that they make are the ones that last disproportionately long. The kinds of ideas and practices and communities that they test out in the college years are the ones that last. The Jewish community in general should not be saying, how can we get the college students to think what I think? We should be saying, how can we learn how to make the things we care about relevant to the next generation? So if we don't do that, it's not going to work. So getting back to your question, it's the beginning still of the process. We'll see how things evolve, but one thing is clear, we all need to be in this together.
Sorry, anybody else who asked the question can also use the microphone. Thanking Uri for his incredible presentation, but also acknowledging the failure of the American Jewish community towards its college populations. This has been going on for a long time, and et chata'ai ani mazkir hayom, to quote the Bible, I am recalling my sins today, that certainly this has been one of the many great failings of the conservative movement. We used to have a program, and it still exists, Koach, for our students on campus, but it has been miserably funded and miserably supported by our movement, and this goes hand in hand with losing our Nativ program, our gap year program, that had to close down for lack of interest. The gap program in Israel, we've got problems within our movement. But aside from the failures of the Jewish community, and this might be tied to it, is how much are universities so caught up in the politics? And, can the universities themselves come up with programs as clever as the ones and the leadership that's clever as the ones you have at Yale to be able to respond to it. Dartmouth also did a wonderful thing. Thanks. There was an article, I think, in JTA, a wonderful article about what a number of professors at Dartmouth did to help hold off the problems. But as many people have indicated, that some of the problems at these universities is a whole culture. You know, they don't just misunderstand Jews, there's so many things they don't understand, or they're trying to respond to certain publics, certain demographics. Either you have the far right-wing condemnation of everything having to do with progressive values, or you have the far left-wing that everything has to be woke. And when I think of woke, I think of Anthony Burgess in Clockwork Orange. I don't know if any of you saw that, where he's locked in with his eyes forced open, a horrible scene. That we're just caught between these two extremes. And what happens, the responses are just, you know, nobody wants to fight against these forces. And how much, you know, do the universities have in terms of strength and courage to be able to say, you're both crazy, we want to take care of our students. And so, and also even in terms of DEI, to be honest, the diversity, equality, inclusion, which, you know, you hear that as Americans, we should all be going, oh yeah, you know, that should come with the mother's milk. On the other hand, even after the issues of Black Lives Matter and all of that, and they began doing some of these things, they were already a couple of years ago questioning, is any of it working? Are we doing it correctly? Do we even know how to do it? So that, I mean, just some of, you know, those issues.
Yeah. I think it's pretty clear we don't know what we're doing. Yeah. They say, I don't know who said this first, that the arc of, what is it? The arc of history bends towards justice. So is that true? I don't know. I mean, are we better off as a society because of egalitarianism? I think so. Are we better off because we're more aware of racism and the inequalities in the criminal justice system and the electoral system? Like, you know, are we better off because we're aware and some of us are activated around those types of issues? I think we probably are. I'm a glass half full kind of guy. So, you know, I think that all these efforts, DEI and others, were designed to do good things and lost their way a bit, because it turns out that, you know, on October 7th, or after October 7th, college students had exactly the same experiences that we did. Even people, I've heard this from alumni and from students, saying, you know, I spent all this time showing up for other people when it was their time of need. I tried to show up, and I figured if I showed up for them, they would show up for me. And here I am, all alone. So I think there is definitely a reckoning that is happening, and eyes wide open, that even the best of the universities are not going to be able to do what Jews need them to do, which is why we have to do it for ourselves. What else is new? Jews have to do it for themselves. I had a conversation with a senior Yale administrator, specifically on the question that you asked about the university's role. And I said, what role, this is off the record, what role do you think the universities should have in this morality debate and all of these things? The person I talked to said, it's really hard, because there are really two schools of thought about what a university should do. The first is do nothing. That the university should be a convener of ideas. And it should not have its own ideas of its own of which of those ideas are better, because then you're putting your thumb on the scale. You're making, you're prioritizing unfairly. Your job is to convene, your job is not to decide. That's one school of thought. The other school of thought is to say that moral leadership is really important in a university. Well, those don't go too well with each other. So this particular person said that what she's been trying to do is to use her own voice. Nobody can tell you shouldn't have your own opinion, but to be careful how she uses that voice so as to make room for other people. And I found that really interesting, because it's really hard to stand around and do nothing for most people, when you see something wrong or you hear something wrong or you're surrounded by wrongness. On the other hand, there are lots of different sides to different stories. The Torah doesn't agree on what the relationship is between the Jewish people and the land of Israel. How are we supposed to agree? How are we supposed to be the definers of truth? So, in general, I think that the more we interact with each other and the more we learn from each other, the better picture of truth we get, because we can see more with more eyes than just with our own two. And sometimes creating a space for other people is a part of that process. It's hard. Leadership is hard. Really hard. Yeah.
I want to try to get you to encapsulate and tie together different things that you've said. If you go back to your opening when you're talking about the situation, what we're seeing and faced with the three universities and so forth, you said something to the effect of the press, and I think we would all agree, focuses on the negative. And the press fuels up a lot of the negative. When you sit here and you think, okay, what's really going on outside of this room? What's happening in those schools where you're not hearing all kinds of horrible things? You mentioned Dartmouth. We have a nephew who goes to Dartmouth. He's in Dartmouth because his father went to Dartmouth. And he's one of these genius kids that picked Dartmouth. If you ask him what's going on, what's the mood on the campus, he'll pretty much go, huh? Because it's quiet. And there's very little going on. We have a granddaughter who goes to Penn State. Why does she go to Penn State? Because her sister did. And she, by the way, is a junior. If you ask her what's going on campus, you'll get the same responses you did from the guy in Dartmouth. What's going on? Nothing. It's very quiet. So my question is, and I don't know that you have the answer, what's really going on out there in the hinterlands? Is it the elite schools where they're having some problems that are getting fueled up? And should we all be terrified as we look at the news, read the papers, listen to the radio, and so on and so forth, that the world led by academia is coming to an end for us? Or is it really pretty much there's not this huge, horrendous mess going on, but it's the small ones, because you have schools like Harvard that are getting fueled up because they're great ones to fuel up? What do you see happening on a more global nature?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm not an expert on all college campuses, and one thing I know is that campuses are all very different from each other. They all have very different cultures. They have different ways of operating. They're very different. So I'm not going to make any blanket statements. What I can tell you is, by and large, you're only hearing the things that you're hearing are only the challenging things. They don't like to talk about, or they don't bother to talk about, how many students came to Shabbat dinner, how many students traveled to Israel over an academic year, how many students came to a Hillel because they were having some type of emotional crisis. Remember, there's a mental health crisis. That's another thing we have to be paying attention to. The antidotes to a mental health crisis, number one is community, and number two is people who care about you. That's what you find when you come to a Hillel. Maybe not everybody has that experience. Most people have that experience. We haven't talked at all about the things that I'm proud about my Hillel. And I'll just mention two of them. One is that we engage every year more than 70% of the Jewish students on campus. I'd like it for it to be higher, but it's higher than 70%. And the other thing, and this is the gem. It comes in 3 parts. Let me see if I can get it right. In 99% of the programs that we did, I'm talking about the 22-23 academic year that I did in June. After 99% of the programs, 80% of the people who came back to something else. 99% of the programs, 80% of people came back again. In 91% of the programs we ran, 90% of the people who came to that event came back to something else. And in 70% of the programs we ran, 100% of people came back for something else. Any community organization on the planet would want to have numbers like that. There's a lot of good stuff happening. There are a lot of students getting engaged with Jewish life in all kinds of ways that people aren't paying that much attention to. The Dartmouth example is a good one because you've got faculty who are stepping forward together, a Jewish member of the faculty and a Muslim member of the faculty who have been in dialogue for years. This didn't just start on October 7th. It's been going on for years. So you can continue something. I said the same thing about what we did, not the same exact story, but the relationships and what we built has been going on for years. So we were able to continue it in a time of struggle. So I don't know how to answer the question of what's happening on lots of places, but if you want to get the full story of what's going on, you can read whatever the press is that you want to read, and sign up for your Hillel's monthly newsletter or weekly newsletter or whatever it is. Find out what they're saying. Doesn't mean the problems aren't there, and it doesn't mean the challenges aren't there. You're getting both. Find out what's going on.
The experience that we're hearing and seeing from the nephew and the granddaughter relative to Hillel is exactly what you said. And to the point of when they couldn't go home for the holidays, Jewish holidays, they went to Hillel. And in particular, our granddaughter, who is much more outgoing and loquacious and so forth than our nephew, I would not really have expected her to take part the way she is. But yes, that's where she went. And yes, she does continue to go there.
I'll just echo what Uri was saying, that there are a lot of campuses out there and they're very different. So, San Francisco University, even when I was there, not at the university, but in San Francisco in the early 90s, it was terrible. And it still is terrible. But for example, my colleague who teaches at NYU said that within the university itself, it's really not so bad. A lot of the people are on the outside who are coming and protesting outside the campus. And so, I think that we do have to take things with a grain of salt and really try and find out from within what's going on and not just from the press.
So, hi, I have a good friend whose granddaughter is applying to college right now, and she's got accepted to several colleges, fairly good schools, and she's basing it on her decision on Jewish life at the college, which is good. And I heard that I attended, one of my grandkids goes to Kushner Academy in Livingston, and the rabbi, the head principal of the school there, now this school, Kushner goes all the way up through high school. So they are now counseling their students based on anti-Semitism at the particular schools. And they're not sending these kids, or not encouraging, I should say, them to attend certain universities, because of what they see is happening.
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's a tough one. I had some discussions with some first-year students at Yale after October 7th, and we were talking about this issue of should students apply to different places. And the students were unanimous in saying they have to apply. They have to come. Because if the students don't come, then there won't be Jews. And anytime there's a vacuum of Jews, anti-Semitism gets a lot worse. Happens every time. So Jews not coming is not a good answer. Now that doesn't help a parent of a 12th grader who has to worry about where their child is going to college. And so I get that. On the other hand, it's actually not that different from the way it was before October 7th. Because there are a lot of people, a lot of potential college students who make their decisions based on the quality of the Jewish community, the robustness of the Jewish community. Does it have an egalitarian minyan? Does it not? Does it have a daily minyan? Does it not? Does it have Shabbat dinners with 200, 300 people at it? Does it not? You know, there's lots of different criteria. And yeah, I think certainly for this moment, obviously, anti-Semitism needs to be one of those criteria. And is the university taking things seriously? And I think the person to ask, or the people to ask, are the people on the Hill who know what's going on, who are actually talking to the university or the college president and the various folks. I mean, on the first Friday night dinner after the attack, we knew it was going to be very large. And I was sitting at home Thursday night, thinking to myself, I think we need bomb sweeps in the building before Shabbat dinner. Shabbat comes very predictably on Fridays. Predictability is the worst vulnerability when it comes to security. So I texted the chief of police. I texted the chief of police for Yale Police. And I said, Anthony, do you think we need bomb sweeps? He said, it's a good idea. It came through with 2 bomb sweeps, K-9 units, the whole deal during the course of the day. We talked about, should we put in metal detectors? We decided not to do that. We did not want to be the most secure, unwelcoming building on the entire campus. We did some bag checking. It's all, you know, the security, and our security friend by the door, I'm sure knows this. Security and welcoming are sometimes opposites of each other. But he's being very welcoming tonight. Very welcoming, and we all feel safe. So thank you very much for being here tonight. Thank you. So you know, it's hard to figure that stuff out, and we have to pay attention to the times that we're in, obviously. But again, the people who are involved with the Hillels on the campuses know exactly what's going on. They can tell you. I mean, they're not going to tell you it's not a good place to come to school, probably, but they'll be real with you because they care about Jewish kids, as we all should. I'll say one last thing, which is I'm also very proud. So going to what Rabbi Popke was saying, as far as I know, Yale is the only campus that has a weekly egalitarian Shabbat morning service, which is, I'm very proud of that we're able to do that. I'm very sad about that from a movement perspective. We've got a lot of work to do there. But like I said, there's a lot of hope.
Before I thank Uri, just want to pick up on what he said, that one of the best ways that we can support our children is to make sure that they love and practice Judaism. That's not necessarily the case for most of liberal Judaism, and here I will put Reform and Conservative together, Reconstructionist, or Reconstructing Judaism, as they call it now. We have to make Jews strong as Jews. And if we don't do that, then everything that comes from the outside will affect them. And, you know, I have to say, growing up in my high school, which, you know, there were not a lot of us who were Jewish, and I was very out there Jewishly. I was, you know, unquestionably, I never had any problems. There were a lot of Arabs in my community, and most of them were Christian Arabs, but Some of my other friends, heard some comments and never. Believe me, I was never the biggest guy in the class. No one had any reason to be afraid of me. The football players, the wrestlers, they weren't worried about some swimmer, even if he swam butterfly. But I had respect. And I think for Jews who are confident Jews and committed Jews, it doesn't mean observing all 613 mitzvot. Actually, nobody can. But the point is, if our kids go to college, and it doesn't start in high school, it starts from preschool. If our kids are given a strong Jewish background and are part of a Jewish community, if their families are part of a Jewish community and involved in a Jewish community, the kids will be much stronger. And the Hillels will also be stronger because they won't have to, like we do, struggling to find people to fill certain roles or to come to events. And here I have to thank Uri, first of all, for what he's doing, period, not here, but the numbers that he is quoting from Yale are astounding, absolutely astounding in the Jewish community. For any university, I would say even sometimes for the seminary, and certainly for any other Jewish institution. And that points to what an incredible job he and his staff are doing, and that they could have such influence on the administrators. And I especially, of course, want to thank him for tonight, for giving such, as I said, an outstanding, clear presentation, but giving us a framework to think about these issues and understand them on a much deeper level, and in a way that we could really perhaps analyze some of the information that comes to us over the airwaves, over the media, and we can share with our families and with our friends. So, toda rabah. We appreciate your talent and your abilities.
Can I just say one last thing to close, just in response to what you said? I completely agree that that having strongly Jewish, strong Jewish identity, strong Jewish experiences are very important. The college students who had Shabbat dinner growing up are more likely to come to Shabbat dinner in college. There's no question about that, etc. The one thing that I want to be really clear about is that making strong Jews is not about talking points. It's not about having a list of things that it's Jewish to think. That is a profoundly un-Jewish approach. Questions are at the essence of what it means to be Jewish. Think about the Passover Seder, which is specifically designed to have children ask questions, and not just the easy ones. So we've got to create environments where Jewish people can ask questions. Because one thing about college students is that they don't like to be manipulated. I know all of you love to be manipulated, but they don't like to be manipulated. They're very allergic to being manipulated. So if you try to teach them that they're wrong and you're right, that feels like manipulation, for better or for worse. So the way to strengthen Jewish identity for young folks that are heading towards college and in college is to engage, is to bring them in. Your voice matters. Your questions matter. Your ideas matter. I don't have to agree with them all. I would love for you to make room for mine, but that starts with my making room for yours. It might be that they're coming with a different one of these frameworks. Maybe you're a Genesis Jew and they're a Leviticus Jew right now. That doesn't make them an anti-Semite. Doesn't make them a bad Jew. Just makes them somebody who's asking questions. And you know what? Chances are you should be asking more questions too. So that's the thing I really want. If when you have the opportunity to engage with people, I really want to encourage you to listen and ask questions and engage with them. Because I think that's how you would want to be treated. And the more we the more we listen to other people, the more likely they are to listen to us.
the two students that were talking down to the other student, where one reconciled, did the other one reconcile? No.
She didn't. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was interesting. I mean, it really only took one to have the impact in the room. But I've also noticed, and this is at the end of the last semester, it's a few weeks ago, that this same student, the one who was shouted down, he has made it a point, at least towards the end of the semester, he had lunch every day with a student who grew up in a traditional Orthodox background, spent 2 years in yeshiva before coming to Yale. They come from very different backgrounds, very different perspectives. They sit down and have lunch every day. I think that's awesome. One is, I think they're both sophomores. They're both sophomores, yeah. I'm here for more questions people have. Thank you all for being here.